This is the JTV Caribbean News. I am Sean Rose. Nearly 3 months after police arrested former Cayman Islands Premier Makeva Bush, on Wednesday, March 20, the Royal Cayman Islands Police charged him with 11 counts of breach of trust, misconduct and theft. Bush, who was originally arrested on December 11, 2012 on suspicion of theft and corruption, was questioned further on Tuesday and on Wednesday returned to the Financial Crime Unit, where he was charged with 2 counts of misconduct in a public office, 4 counts of breach of trust by a member of the Legislative Assembly, and 5 counts of theft. He was granted bail and is expected to appear in court on April 12. The allegations include the misuse of a government credit card as well as his alleged involvement in an importation of commercial dynamite without the correct permits. 1 week after his initial arrest, Bush was ousted from office when Cayman Islands lawmakers passed a vote of no confidence in him. Following an outbreak in the Turks and Caicos Islands of 25 cases of a sickness that causes vomiting and diarrhea, the Carnival Cruise Port on the capital island of Grand Turk closed operations until sanitation measures have been completed. Health officials under the Health Minister and Premier Dr. Rufus Ewing have been trying in vain to locate the source of the virus causing the outbreak. There are no inter-island travel restrictions, and a few cases have now popped up in Providenciales, the most populated area. According to Caribbean News Now, there has been a continuing problem with the public water supply in Grand Turk, which has been in disrepair for approximately 7 years. The reverse osmosis plant was replaced by the interim government, but it remains for the elected government to provide the enclosure building and complete the installation. It is thought that the system may be contaminated. Each cruise ship passenger pays a $3.50 arrival fee, and the closure has resulted in economic setbacks to the government and local vendors. The St. Lucia government has warned that workers on strike may not be paid for staying away from the job. Members of the Civil Service Association have stayed away from the job in request of a 9.5% wage increase. The government has continued to remain resolute in its offer of 4% with concessions, contending that it cannot afford the demands of public officers. Sarah Peter reports.
No work, no pay. Could that be the stance taken by the government of St. Lucia in the wake of strike action by civil servants? For a third consecutive day, CSA members remained off the job in light of their demands for a 9.5% wage increase. While the other public sector unions in the TUF have accepted the state's 4% wage proposal with concessions, the CSA has soundly rejected the offer, rendering the wage increase for the other unions void. They contend they do not benefit from the proposed concessions and have undertaken industrial action to validate their position. However, Cabinet Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister says, despite the impact of the strike, all government departments are operational.
Yes, of course, it is certainly taking its toll on those who are, and that's why I think we're even more appreciative of the efforts of those who are at work and providing service to the public. So I mean, in no way should we minimize the impact. I mean, if all those persons are not at work and there's no impact, then maybe that says something as to how large the service is or isn't. You know, maybe it would suggest that there are too many persons in the service, or it would lend credence to that view. But that's not quite the case.
He added the protesters should be mindful that legislation makes provisions to not compensate workers who fail to show up for work.
The union has decided to consider its options and taken the actions that it feels is necessary to advance its interests. The government would be under similar obligation to do what it has to do to protect the welfare of the country, to safeguard its interests. Because the question then becomes, is it fair? Is it fair? Is it just for some employees to be at work while others aren't? I mean, that's as much a question, because as you would have recognized from your previous question, that we have asked persons to do other assignments, to double up, to continue to provide service to the public. So how are they to be treated? How are they to be compensated?
However, experts say the decision to withhold pay from state employees on the picket line is unprecedented and highly unlikely. Labour officer at the St. Lucia Labour Department, Andrew Kwashi, says if the government does not pay public servants, it will be the first time in the island's history protesting civil servants will not be compensated by the state.
In keeping with the Labour Act, the section dealing with industrial relations resolution, It states that the employer is not obliged to make payments for those workers who are strike. It did not say that the employer shall not pay. And nowhere in the history of striking public servants in St. Lucia that the payments have been withheld from them. So workers need to know why is the law says that you are not obliged to receive payment. It does not say the employer shall not pay your wages.
The government has nevertheless remained resolute on its 4% counter-offer, while the CSA is unyielding in its 9.5% wage hike demand. However, they point out their request is not set in stone. Sarah Peter, HDS News Force.
Barbados' Minister of Foreign Affairs, Maxine McLean, has highlighted the importance of trade to counteract perceived weaknesses within national economies across the region. In an address to delegates at Wednesday's opening of a two-day conference hosted by the Caribbean Export Development Agency, McLean appealed to regional governments to capitalize on the various opportunities which present themselves for countries to work together to chart a path towards regional economic development. She said it is a critical step in the regional integration process, adding that the strategy must recognize the region's various strengths and challenge the business community to take up the charge to capitalize on the opportunities created. McLean said the region must develop an export or die mentality because they can no longer sustain the increasing import bills across the region. The government of Grenada has indicated that it will default on its US dollar and Eastern Caribbean dollar bonds due 2025 because it has been unable to secure financing to make a coupon payment on March 15. According to Moody's Investors Service, the liquidity crisis leading to the default is credit negative for Grenada and elevates the risk of distress spilling over to its peers in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. In Moody's view, Grenada's default has systemic implications for the Eastern Caribbean currency through two channels, financial and institutional. The default will be Grenada's second since 2004 and mirrors wider distress in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. St. Kitts and Nevis defaulted on its debt in 2011 and Antigua and Barbuda restructured its debt in 2010. Both countries have active IMF standby programs with embedded conditionality and structural reform requirements, while all 6 ECCU members, which also include St. Vincent, St. Lucia and Dominica, rely on emergency IMF credit facilities for financing reconstruction following the impact of hurricanes. Government debt in the ECCU is high. The regional average was 94% of GDP in 2012, on par with distressed euro area sovereigns, and regional GDP contracted at an average rate of 2.1% between 2009 and 2012, and only a modest recovery is expected in 2013. For the GTV Caribbean News, I am Sean Rose.
Coming up next on JTV News. BVI Red Cross launches UK-funded disaster risk reduction program. One of the world's top graphic artists shares tips with students at Elmore Stout. The invaluable role of social workers and the giving of bundles of joy. Trophy and celebration for Really Uptown's historic Triple Crown win. And fans rock to the sweet calypso rhythms of David Rudder.